Welcome back to another explainer. When we look back at deep history, it's incredibly easy to just picture our ancient ancestors as these primitive, grunting cavemen, right? Totally disconnected from who we are today. But what if I told you that the fundamental core of human nature, our emotional landscape, our intelligence, even our daily anxieties, really hasn't changed at all? Today, we're diving into the absolutely fascinating insights of Dr. Irving Finkel. He's a world-renowned Assyriologist and curator at the British Museum, and we're going to use his work to challenge literally everything we assume about the ancient world. So here's the crucial question we're tackling today. What could a 32,000-year-old Paleolithic cave painting possibly share with ancient Mesopotamian clay tablets and, of all things, a teenager's angsty modern diary? Well, as you'll see, the answer is this profound shared thread of humanity. We're going to trace the entire history of human communication, going all the way from the walls of ancient caves straight to the paper notebooks hidden under our beds.
Here's our roadmap for today. First, we'll look at the birth of writing. Second, the first flood myth. Third, mapping the ancient world. And finally, the Great Diary Project. Let's get right into it.
Starting with part 1, the birth of writing, from caves to clay. To figure out how we actually started communicating, we've got to travel back tens of thousands of years. Let's consider Dr. Finkel's brilliant observation about Paleolithic cave art. When you look at these 32,000-year-old paintings in places like France, they aren't just rudimentary doodles. Depicting an animal accurately, in physical motion, is an extraordinary level of artistic mastery. Honestly, that's something most modern adults can't do, even with training. So Dr. Finkel proposes this really fascinating theory. Rather than every single cave just happening to have a resident Leonardo da Vinci, it's highly likely there were itinerant, traveling master artists. These were geniuses of their time who literally wandered from community to community, painting these stunning masterpieces. It just goes to show that specialized, highly capable human talent has existed right from the very beginning. Now, jumping forward to ancient Mesopotamia, around 3500 BC, we start seeing the emergence of pictographs. Now, there's a really common misconception here. People think writing was born out of this sudden, romantic desire to record poetry or spoken language. But Dr. Finkel argues it was actually born purely out of the practical necessity of commerce. Just imagine two ancient traders trying to make a deal, but they share absolutely no common language. They needed a generic, mutual system of marks to essentially say, hey, I am trading 3 sheep for this much barley. So writing actually started as an economic tool for strangers to barter. It wasn't until around 3000 BC that some absolute genius realized these established pictographic signs could actually be used to represent the phonetic sounds of the Sumerian language. That was a real game changer. That breakthrough is what finally allowed them to write down complex grammar, specific names, and eventually sprawling, epic stories. Which brings us perfectly to part 2, the first flood myth, a story of survival. Because once they could write phonetically, they started recording incredible stories, and many of those echo super loudly in our own modern traditions. This leads us to the Babylonian flood story, which actually predates the biblical account of Noah by a full 1,000 years. And this brilliantly illustrates just how relatable ancient people were. So in the Babylonian myth, the gods decide to wipe out humanity with a massive flood. And why? Because humans were multiplying too fast and had become, quote, too noisy. Literally, the gods just wanted a peaceful afternoon snooze. So it's this grand apocalyptic story of total world destruction, right? But it's deeply rooted in the most everyday relatable complaint imaginable. The neighbors are just being way too loud. But here is where the story takes a brilliant twist. In the Babylonian tale, the gods give really specific instructions to build a giant circular coracle. Basically, a highly practical, unsinkable round boat made of local reeds and pitch. It didn't need to actually go anywhere, it just needed to float on the floodwaters. But in the later biblical translation, the ark is famously described as an oblong, coffin-shaped box. So why the huge difference? Well, Dr. Finkel discovered that ancient Mesopotamian students actually learned geometry by calculating a circle drawn perfectly inside a square. Over centuries of this story being passed down and translated by different scribes, the curvy part of the instructions was just misunderstood or totally lost, leaving only the dimensions of the square. So this incredibly practical round lifeboat was essentially mistranslated into a giant wooden box. Let's transition now to section 3, mapping the ancient world. We've talked about their art and their stories, but how did these sharp minds actually visualize the physical planet they lived on? Well, we have this incredible artifact from the 7th century BC, the Babylonian map of the world.
It depicts a circular terrain containing their known cities, and it's surrounded entirely by a ring of bitter water, basically the sea. But beyond that water, pointing outward kind of like a compass, are 8 distinct triangles. These represented remote, mysterious lands. And far from just making things up out of thin air, they populated these outer regions with exotic animals described by far-flung travelers. Dr. Finkel notes that one of the animals described is very likely a rhinoceros. It proves these ancient people were deeply curious explorers, exchanging wild tales in Babylonian taverns, literally just like backpackers do today. This brings up a really profound point from Dr. Finkel. He says, "You have this same spread of ability, the same spread of intelligence. People in Mesopotamia observed a very great deal about the world." We have to remember that without modern light pollution, these ancient people laid on their roofs and stared up at a crystal clear, stunningly complex night sky. Their advanced astronomy and mathematics? It wasn't magic. It was the result of brilliant, curious human minds relentlessly observing their reality. They were exactly as intelligent as we are right now. They were just working with different tools. And this deep connection to our past brings us to our fourth and final section, the Great Diary Project, Saving Everyday Voices. We are officially shifting from ancient clay to modern paper. You see, Dr. Finkel's modern passion is rescuing the unpublished diaries of everyday people. Think about it. These everyday diaries are truly the cuneiform tablets of our time. Just as ancient scribes recorded the mundane details of grain sales and local gossip on clay, modern ordinary diaries give us an unfiltered look at true human history. We focus so much on the carefully curated biographies of famous politicians or leaders, but the daily logs of average people, just living, working, and feeling, are the ultimate primary source of the human condition. And the scale of this effort is absolutely staggering. 22,000. That is the number of ordinary diaries Dr. Finkel and his dedicated team have literally rescued from being thrown away into landfills. It represents this unparalleled archive of everyday life spanning centuries. We're talking about people just noting the daily weather, what they ate for lunch, and their deepest, most private thoughts, all preserved for the future. To show you just how powerful this collection is, Dr. Finkel recalls a diary written by a 15-year-old boy. The boy wrote about walking to a bus stop, just completely agonizing over whether a girl he had a massive crush on would be there. He was so overwhelmed with anxiety and desire that he literally had to hold onto a lamppost in physical anguish. When read aloud, it's not a joke. It is deeply, profoundly affecting. It perfectly captures that life and death feeling of being a teenager. It's the exact same raw human emotion that has existed since the Paleolithic era, just recorded in pencil instead of on a cave wall. But Dr. Finkel warns that this rich historical record is in severe danger. Physical paper, written in pencil, will basically last forever if you keep it dry. It captures the messy, unedited truth of a person, complete with grammatical mistakes, crossed-out words, in complete freedom from the rigid oversight of a computer spell check. Digital text, on the other hand, it's highly perishable. It forces us into sanitized formats, blocks our creative flow with those annoying red squiggly lines, and worse, we all know how easily a hard drive can crash or a file can be accidentally deleted. A blog is written for the world to see, but a diary is a private truth. And sadly, we are losing that medium. Which brings us to our final thought for today. As we transition entirely into an era of fleeting digital text and heavily edited online personas, what enduring evidence of our true, everyday humanity are we actually leaving behind for the historians of tomorrow? Will they find our digital cuneiform, or will our hard drives just be a blank slate? It's definitely something to think about the next time you pick up a pen. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.